Right. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Ronald Rupnarayan, Deputy Dean in the Faculty of Food and Agriculture and one of your chairpersons today. I also have with me my co-chair, who is from the University of Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Ria Gopi, who will assist me in the process of chairing this event today. But prior to getting started, we must do service to country. So I'm kindly asking all persons to please stand for the national anthem of Trinidad and Tobago. Be seated. Thank you. Mr. Rick Javed Ali, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, we're representing Senator the Honorable Ravi Ratiram, Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, Professor Derek Chady, Deputy Principal, and other members of Campus Executive Management of the University of the West Indies St. Augustine Campus, Professor Mark Woodivera, Dean of the Faculty of Food and Agriculture, University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, Professor Stephen Joseph, President of the University of Trinidad and Tobago, distinguished presenters, specially invited guests, representatives of our valued sponsors, the Agricultural Development Bank and MALF Limited, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. So we are at a point where we are attempting to provide some public awareness and education around the giant African snail. Many persons here would have known or have interacted with the snail in some form or fashion because it has become one of the most notorious invasive species in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, while that is a problem, and there have been many attempts through the Ministry of Agriculture, our colleagues at UTT, even at UE as well, to address different concerns, there has not been any forum like this to educate the public on the various aspects of the giant African snail. What we are about to do today is somewhat novel because it's a concern. People pick up these snails, they try to play with them, some people might even eat them, you don't know, right? But there are safety concerns. There are concerns with what is possible. And transforming a disaster into an opportunity or some sort of negative thing into an opportunity is what universities should really be trying to do. And this partnership between the University of the West Indies, the Ministry of Agriculture, and the University of Trinidad and Tobago is examining all the potential concerns attached to this giant African snail, known as a pest, but perhaps it may transform into something useful. We do not know. And we have to continue to investigate and explore along the way, right? Some of our colleagues who are sitting right in this room would have had the pleasure, I don't know if pleasure is the right word, but they would have had the opportunity to eat the giant African snail. And not escargot or no fancy thing that we usually are talking about, giant African snail, the same one that you see outside, etc. So that is really what this symposium is intended to do, to build awareness of how to handle that, of the potential commercial sides of different aspects of the giant African snail, and also give persons who attended and took time out of their busy schedules to be here today an opportunity to interact with the various experts or panelists who will be performing or taking part in a panel discussion at the end of the sessions today. So that is really my welcome remarks. I trust that you all will have a very good afternoon, an afternoon where you are filled with new information. And please feel free to save your questions for the end so that persons will be able to, provide some sort of insights into handling this particular creature and hopefully finding a way to deal with it that is sustainable and commercially viable for all of us. All right? So we want to move straight into our opening session, and we have some remarks from various persons. The first person I'd like to call is our very own Deputy Principal, Professor Derek Chady, to give some welcome remarks on behalf of the University of the West Indies. He's also the acting principal at this point in time.
Thank you very much, Chair, and a pleasant good afternoon to everyone. Mr. Rick Javed Ali, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries, representing Senator the Honorable Ravi Rataram, Minister of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries, members of the campus executive management team, the University of the West Indies St. Augustine campus, Professor Mark Woodavera, Dean, Faculty of Food and Agriculture. And Dean, you do excellent work. You've had so many, over the last academic year, you've had so many engagements, and this is another one of the important engagements. Professor Stephen Joseph, President, UTT, distinguished presenters, specially invited guests, representatives of our valued sponsors, Agriculture Development Bank, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, once again, a very pleasant good afternoon. It is my distinct honor to welcome you to this evening and bring greetings on behalf of our campus principal. I would like to especially acknowledge the presence of Mr. Rick Javed Ali, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries. I extend sincere appreciation for your presence at this very important public education awareness symposium, jointly hosted by our Faculty of Agriculture, Food and Agriculture, and our colleagues at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. We are gathered to discuss a real and growing serious threat that demands our urgent attention. This evening's title, The Giant African Snail, Friend 04, Exploring Risk, Roles, and Resources. And should we add Dean Cuisine? Could not be more timely or more necessary. GAS, the giant African snail, once a curiosity, has far outgrown the simple label of persistent front or backyard pest in our gardens. Indeed, I can confidently say that all of us here, would have come across the African snail and would have been fascinated by it, would have had some of you, I know, one of my nephews were playing, very young child playing with one of the snails. So it's very important for us to really look at the giant African snail and really to see how do we approach this particular invasion that is taking place. So it is among the top 100 invasive species globally. In regions where outbreaks are unmanaged, the giant African snail has been documented to destroy over 500 types of plants. In many Caribbean territories, including Trinidad and Tobago, farmers have reported significant crop loss, and there have been associated high annual control costs for regional governments. So the giant African snail is indeed a cost to the society. Beyond agriculture and its economic impact on our region, the snail poses risk to human health. The giant African snail is a known carrier of the rat lungworm parasite. Its rapid production also of up to 1,200 eggs per year per snail makes it nearly impossible to contain without coordinated science-based intervention. These few facts highlight the extent of its destructive power and reveals a multifaceted challenge that impacts our agriculture, threatens our biodiversity, and raises serious concerns for public health. Left unmanaged, it will severely compromise the region's goal of food security and economic stability. But I'm especially encouraged by the presence of experts from the University of the West Indies and the University of Trinidad and Tobago, along with the Ministry of Agriculture, official farmers, Ministry of Agriculture officials, farmers, scientists, and the community members all coming together to address this particular challenge. And that's what the university environment is all about, to bring together, besides, of course, academic engagement, research, to also engage the community on very important issues and important issues like this. And again, Dean, I want to compliment you on the excellent work that your faculty is doing. And let's give the Dean as well as UTT present a round of applause. The gathering goes merely than just discussing the problem. The Public Education Symposium, this Public Education Symposium offers an opportunity to engage directly with the public stakeholders and experts from across the sector. This type of inter-institutional, community-based approach is essential if we are to manage the threat of the giant African snail's sustainability. This approach would also help to empower communities with knowledge, spark innovation in response strategies, and building institutional bridges for long-term solutions. And that's important to stress, really long-term solutions. It reflects the University of the West Indies' commitment to public education, scientific outreach, and collaborative research, community problem solving. It is my hope that the outcomes of this symposium will include a deepening of public understanding of the real risk involved with giant African snail invasion and the promotion of responsible community-level action to strengthen the strengthening of inter-institutional ties between academia, government, civil society, in the shared management of environmental threats, to identify new opportunities, not just for the containment of the species, but also for the safe and sustainable utilization of the giant African snail under controlled, research-guided conditions, as well as also sparking a national response that is informed, coordinated, and has resilience. I would like to thank once again the Dean of the Faculty of Agriculture, Professor Mark Woodavera, faculty collaborators at UWI and at the University of Trinidad and Tobago, and all of the organizers of this event for creating a space of dialogue. I stress that, it's a space for dialogue, to demonstrate as well as to share knowledge which can ignite the action urgently needed. Once again, thank you all for your participation in this very important event. Your presence indicates that you're very much committed to being part of the solution to this particular challenge. May this evening be rich in knowledge, collaboration, and forward movement. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. All protocols observed. Professor Chedi, thank you so much for setting the tone of this evening and bringing in this idea of One Health. Invasive species has been a problem both from an aquatic and terrestrial perspective for Trinidad and Tobago, and it's a pleasure to be a part of this event this evening to ensure that this level of collaboration, coalition amongst many institutions, empowerment, and innovation continues. With that, it's my pleasure to now introduce the president from UTT, from the University of Trinidad and Tobago, Professor Stephen Joseph, for his remarks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gopi. Please allow me to stand on the already established protocols and to say what a pleasure it is for me to bring remarks on behalf of the University of Trinidad and Tobago, UTT, as we join with the University of the West Indies in hosting this timely and important public education symposium. As you know, our focus this evening, the giant African snail, is to me as intriguing as it is urgent. Invasive species like this pose real and growing threats. They challenge our agricultural systems, strain our ecosystems, and raise serious concerns for public health. Yet, today's theme provocatively asks, friend or foe? We are reminded that even the most disruptive species may carry hidden lessons or unexpected value, if we can only take the time to study them. And this is precisely where universities must step in, not only as centers of research, as I said earlier, centers of research and innovation, but as collaborators and public educators. So I wish to commend our faculty, particularly Dr. Marcus Ramdwa and his colleagues, for contributing to this national conversation through science-based inquiry and public engagement. At UTT, our mission is to build national capacity through applied learning, through entrepreneurship, and industry-relevant research. The giant African snail, while a clear threat to crops and food security and public health, also presents an opportunity to rethink how we prepare for and respond to ecological threats through early detection, coordinated response, effective control measures, and, of course, community education. It may also open doors to bioinnovation. I believe the true strength of this symposium lies not just in the academic discourse to follow, but in its potential to spark meaningful cross-sector collaboration, bringing together government, academia, industry, and communities to find real, lasting solutions. Let us use this moment to reaffirm our shared responsibility, not only to raise awareness, but to empower farmers, to empower families, and future generations with the knowledge and tools that they need to act. So in closing, I want to thank UWI St. Augustine for hosting, and all the participating institutions, the panelists and organizers for their commitment to a more resilient and informed Trinidad and Tobago. Let us continue to learn, to question, and above all, to act. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Joseph. I literally was telling my co-chair while you were speaking, we could have seen how intriguing this was to you on your face. Yeah, it was very explicit. And the other thing was you mentioned some very interesting thing, unexpected value. And that's a key thing for invasive species like this. Sometimes through investigations, something that was a pest could turn into something commercially. The other key thing is that sometimes, you know, UWI and UTT are seen as friend or foe. We don't know, but today, we are definitely friends, right? Right, good. So we move on to the feature address, which would be done by our PS, who is representing the Minister, Rick Javed Ali. So PS, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Master of Ceremonies. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Professor Mark Woodiviera, Dean of the Faculty of Food and Agriculture. Professor Derek Chady, Deputy Principal at the University of the West Indies. Professor Stephen Joseph, President of the UTT. Representatives of the Agriculture Society of Trinidad and Tobago. Representatives of the Agricultural Development Bank, academic colleagues, scientists, farmers, students, members of the media, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It is truly an honor to be here at this public education and awareness symposium and to represent the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries on behalf of Senator the Honorable Ravi Ratiram, Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries. While he very much wanted to be a part of this important engagement, he is regrettably unable to attend and therefore has asked me to extend his sincere apologies along with his continued commitment and that of our ministry to addressing the giant African snail and other invasive threats that impact our agriculture, ecosystems, and public health. In that spirit, I bring greetings from the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries and extend our deep appreciation to the University of the West Indies, the University of Trinidad and Tobago, and the Faculty of Food and Agriculture. Your collective leadership in research, public education, and multi-sector collaboration continues to strengthen our national capacity to respond to these challenges in meaningful and lasting ways. This symposium, under the theme, The Giant African Snail, Friend or Foe, Exploring Risks, Rules, and Resources, could not be more timely. It challenges us to take a hard look at one of the most disruptive, invasive species in Trinidad and Tobago, the giant African snail, and to reflect on how we as a society can respond more strategically and more sustainably. Since its first confirmed presence in Trinidad and Tobago in 2008, in Trinidad in 2008 and in Tobago in 2019, the giant African snail has spread across dozens of communities. Its movement is largely due to the accidental transfer of infested soil, mulch, plants, and even construction materials and equipment. While often dismissed as a mere garden nuisance, this species poses a serious threat, feeding on hundreds of plant species, competing with the native biodiversity, and carrying parasites such as rat lungworm, which can affect human health. Its presence reminds us that food security isn't just about crop production or market prices. It's also about protecting the integrity of the systems that support agriculture. Invasive species like this one undermine those systems, and so our response must be comprehensive, science-based, and rooted in community action. The ministry has been responding through a national Giant African Snail task force that draws on the expertise from several of our internal divisions, including our research division, our extension and training and information services, our regional administration North Division, our regional administration South Division, our forestry division, and our animal and production and health division. Given the pest's widespread presence, our strategy has evolved from extradition to long-term management. This shift acknowledges that we are dealing with an entrenched issue that requires sustained attention and action across sectors. Our teams are engaged in ongoing public sensitization throughout schools, communities, and stakeholder briefings. We've strengthened surveillance through reporting hotlines and emails, and our field officers continue to work directly with farmers, residents, and institutions to identify infestations, support safe baiting, and to monitor hotspots. A key part of our response is the implementation of a national bait distribution policy. This policy ensures that baits, particularly those containing iron phosphate, are distributed in a safe, coordinated, transparent, and accountable manner. It emphasizes proper handling, protection of non-target species, and accurate record keeping. In doing so, we avoid the inefficiencies and the risk of ad hoc giveaways and focus instead on areas of verified need. That being said, no amount of bait or field staff will be enough without widespread public participation. The fight against the giant African snail must be a shared effort, one that involves every household, school, business, and local authority alike. That's why tonight's symposium is so important. We are grateful to UWI and to UTT, not just for hosting this session, but for arming the public with the tools, fact sheets, and research needed to demystify the issue and empower citizens to respond. Events such as this one are more than just academic. They are a reflection of what it truly means to take shared responsibility for our nation's biosecurity. Looking ahead, the ministry is focused on a number of priority actions: reestablishing active surveillance in high-risk zones, expanding public education with updated multimedia focus and multimedia tools, equipping community groups and local authorities with response kits for safe collection and disposal, and improving internal data systems to better track infestations, responses, and resources. At the same time, we remain open to research and innovation that explores safe, science-backed uses for removal of snails, whether in composting or non-food industrial applications, once public health and biosecurity safeguards are strictly upheld. At its core, the giant African snail crisis is a test of our ability to act collectively, to think innovatively, and to communicate clearly. It challenges us to bridge the gap between science and action, between policy and people. And it reminds us that everyone has a role to play, not just as bystanders, but as active partners in the solution. So as we share insights this evening, I encourage each and every one of you, researchers, students, farmers, public officers, engaged citizens, to consider how you may be able to contribute. Whether it is via spreading awareness, reporting sightings, or supporting coordinated cleanups, your action matters. Together, we can move from reactive responses to proactive management rooted in shared responsibility. So on behalf of the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, I thank you very much for this opportunity to participate and reaffirm the ministry's commitment to this national effort. Let us all continue to work together to protect our food systems, safeguard our communities, and preserve the biodiversity that sustains us all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ali. It is always, again, such a pleasure to note that our ministry has that depth of passion, interest, and action. And I always said, I work in the university, so students who are out here, the ministry is doing a lot of work, so, you could parallel some of your research and some of your work to come in your careers so that we could make, life a lot easier for ourselves. And this idea of this One Health approach, where we're looking at things from multiple angles, using multiple stakeholders, is very important. And this idea of biosecurity is coming time and time again, and it's something that I'm quite passionate about, and I'm grateful to hear that the ministry is also that passionate on it as well. Speaking of passion, speaking of innovation, etc., we're now down to the core of the program. So first, thank you to all our opening speakers, but no offense, the real meat and potatoes, or should I say, snail bait, is to come. So I'd like to welcome our first presentation, looking at the current distribution, spread, control, and management strategies in Trinidad and Tobago, by the Director of Research from the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, Mr. Ian Mohammed. Mr. Mohammed.
Right, I guess. Right. I don't know if there's a clicker for or somebody will change the slides. See, you ask and and you get it. Right, so don't worry, I'm not going to bore you all, and there's not going to be a very long presentation because a lot was said in the feature address in terms of what the ministry has been doing and what has happened over those years that this giant African snail has been in the country. As the symposium indicated, friend or foe. So I'm not going to actually comment on that too much because as we said, there are people who, see videos of people eating the snail, which, is something that I can't wrap my head around, but maybe all that we will see what happens. Yeah? So, the giant African snail is considered one of the most invasive species in the world. That has been already voiced, it has already been communicated, and it poses threats to agriculture, the environment, human and animal health. So this presentation that I put together will basically walk you through a little history, biology. Hopefully it won't be too repetitive with other presentations, but I think the message will be implanted eventually. Threats, surveillance data, control strategies, and recommendations. The giant African snail was first detected in Trinidad and Tobago several years ago, and since then periodic outbreaks and increased sightings have made it a recurrent issue. Again, we have two seasons in the country. We have a dry season and a rainy season. So in the dry season, the population will basically go down because it's not the right conditions in the snail, and then as the rain starts, it goes back up. So 1 minute you see it, the other time you won't see it. And historical patterns show the importance of constant vigilance and sustained management. It is known as Achatina follicula. The gas is a hermaphroditic and reproduces rapidly. Again, you bait, the snail dies, but it throws out its eggs. Hence, the cycle continues. A single snail can lay hundreds of eggs several times for the year, and it feeds on over 500 different plant species and can survive in various environments. You might keep your yard clean, but if the neighbor yard not clean, snails will just keep coming back across by you. The gas causes major crop losses, especially in leafy vegetables and fruit crops. And its droppings, they usually would more or less be very unsightly on buildings, walkways, and on public infrastructure, all these slime trails, and some people hate to see it. And it can transmit diseases to humans, such as eosinophilic meningitis. I'm sure I pronounced that correct. Through its slime trails. All right? So that's a point to note. With regards to surveillance and distribution, between 2024 and 2025, reports indicate at least approximately 80 active gas sites in Trinidad. And in Tobago, it has been confirmed in 4 parishes. So basically, it's all over the country. Because remember, it's a hitchhiker pest. So in soil, people like to buy topsoil, and it may come from a different area and so on. So eggs or juveniles, everything will probably move in it. We have actually had cases where people see they pass through some mud, and then the snail is there up under the fender. We've actually seen that. And these figures highlight the widespread nature of the issue and the need for coordinated responses. So that's why I wanted to put that in this slide. This map shows the distribution, because over the years we've been able to track and using GIS and so on to basically map out based on the reports that are coming through hotlines and through actual assessments. All right, and that's it for Tobago. Yes, 4 parishes in Tobago. Right. Strategies include, this is management strategies now, include physical removal, baiting, and habitat management. You have to keep the environment clean. That message is something that is being communicated on a regular basis. Emphasis is placed on integrated pest management to reduce reproduction and spread. And through collaborative efforts being employed with communities, local authorities, and schools, all these are methods that we can use in the whole management of this particular pest. Right. I jump straight to public awareness. Public sensitization is crucial to the success of any eradication strategy. The ministry has hosted community meetings, media engagements, and school outreach programs. And these initiatives will aim to educate and empower citizens to play a proactive role. In other words, the message is that the ministry cannot do everything. Community has to be involved, people have to be involved. We can't keep depending on the ministry because as is everything, resources are limited. Some of the flyers that would have been done by the ministry through the extension division as part of the awareness program. These are like some of them, which will basically help people identify, basically give you tips on what to do, the use of the bait, how to dispose of it. So that whole public awareness is something that has been, we have flyers that basically educating the public, right? So at least from that standpoint, the message is out there, the message is clear in terms of how to handle the snail, what to use, and the ministry will continue to monitor and also give assistance. Because we do get reports and we do the site visits to see what is really happening to make sure that we capture all the information because the data is important. Right, there's another one that we did on the metaldehyde because that particular bait for high infestations is the one that is more recommended. The switch to the iron phosphate is more so to capture the whole issue with being pet friendly. We have a lot of people in the yards, they have dogs, so that fear of the dogs itself, consuming or getting sick. Well, the iron phosphate bait is one that is one to look at. It's a new one that is being, as part of the bait distribution policy, is wanted to be distributed. It is known, or according to information, because it was evaluated, and we're still evaluating, to even put back iron into the soil, which is something beneficial. Right, so far, based on research finding, at least in our research division, we've evaluated all the baits available. We've done field trials, and the use of lime or calcium hydroxide in solution is one that we would have did some work with. Lime in solution as a means to kill the snail is something that is effective. Not using the powder alone, that wasn't effective at all. Right? But again, the metaldehydes and the iron phosphates are still the main methods, but we were also, because when you look at the internet and when you look at all the videos circulating, there are a lot of recommendations out there. And sometimes we have to evaluate and make sure that it's just not, sensationalism. It's not just thing. It has to show that it's working. All right, so I don't want to say too much on that because there are a number of other products on the market and so on. The ministry is not in the business of pushing any particular thing. It's not that. We're looking at baiting. Baiting is the way to get your population down. And based on the size of the population, the type of bait that you will use is what will determine. Right, now there are some challenges and constraints, as I was saying. One of the major constraints is the dependency on the state for bait, but again, we have to do something. So that in itself is still being, is still being supplied, but the baits are available in the agri shops. You can buy it. It's not to say that you have to depend on whether the ministry can give you, because at some point in time, resources have to be used to do other things. Right? So there are some resource limitations. There's also a need for more durable and sustainable community involvement mechanisms. All right, so that aspect is important. Recommendations in the way forward, we recommend enhancing public-private partnerships to increase response capacity. Legislative amendments are also being explored to strengthen control measures, and obviously increased funding, research support, and cross-sectoral collaboration will be key. In conclusion, the giant African snail is not just an agricultural issue, it's a national problem. Everyone has a role to play. Citizens, schools, businesses, and state agencies. So we all have to work together to coordinate and sustain basically all that pressure that is required to get that snail under control. And that's it.
I thank you very much, Mr. Mohammed, for enlightening us about how to, understand the spread and distribution. I noticed something very interesting about that map. The map where you showed the distribution, it coincides with something else, where there are lots of people. Basically, it is almost aligned to population density, which tells us something as well, right? That being said, I need to remind you all that the little appendages that you have in your hands, some of you, I'm kindly asking that you put them on silent because we have media and it's causing a little bit of an issue with their recordings, etc. So please put your cell phone on silent or on vibrate. That being said, we have another technical presentation that would be done by Dr. Marcus Ramdwa, who will be speaking about understanding the giant African snail, biology, spread, and impact. So we are slightly behind time, so I wouldn't delay any longer. Dr. Ramdwa, the floor is yours.
All right, good evening, everyone. All protocols observed. I'm not going to stay confined to that. I'm going to play the context in which I'm going to present this session. We're going to review the major concerns, and some people have already lamented on that, the issue with the 500 plants that is consumed by the giant African snail. To understand the significance of the snail shell size, and that's a huge point that I would like to convey today, if it's one thing we're going to leave with here today, is that we need to understand the size of the shell in the context of its reproductive ability. To understand the rainy season influence, by that I mean the seasonal dynamics between the dry and the wet season, and I'll share some light on that, and again, to control the way forward. So it is 100 of the world's most invasive pests. The problems we've all seen, it produces very rapidly, fast growth rate, feeds on over 500 plant species. We've heard before, it's effective for the rat lungworm. Threat to biodiversity, because this snail is in fact destroying our indigenous snail, the local snails that we normally see commonly found in our yard spaces. Of course, we've all experienced it's very difficult to eradicate. This is the newspaper headlines. People experiencing the snail in Shguanas, Barrackpore, Fyzabad. It's also in Waterfield, Arima, St. Augustine. We're all experiencing it. As people have said before, past presenters, that we have all experienced this snail in one way, form, or fashion or the other. This is the extent of the damage. It could rip open into a husk of corn. It's not just simple lettuce plants. It's doing that. Even more so in the newspaper, entire pumpkin that's totally being devoured by the snail, of course, over time, etc. So here we look at the reproductive dynamics of the snail, and this is what it looks like when they copulate. It tends to be normally shells of the same size that would come together and breed. Normally you wouldn't find a small and a large, they tend to be of the similar size, from about 4.5 months. That's even within the rainy season period, June to December. You're going to get a 4.5 in there somewhere, right? So we have active mating commences during the rainy season. Presenters have indicated 500 eggs in one clutch, or 1,200 offsprings from one individual. 1,200 offsprings from one individual. And when you see thousands of snails in a field, if you could imagine and extrapolate that, you understand what we're facing. All right? So monitor snail emergence and timely baiting is important. We've heard that from Ministry of Agriculture. We tend to always wait until we start seeing them. We might ignore it. But the minute you see it, you have to attack it right away. Remember, 1,200 snails from one. That's the amount of eggs it lay, and that's the offspring that is going to result from one. So, this is the egg output. We're seeing that. Of course, it's in the rainy season, very rare. We're going to find snails laying eggs in the dry season. However, this last year gone by, there were some rainfall events. Oscillations in rainfall could lead to some reproductive activity occurring in the dry season. The survivability, of course, is going to be varied. So this is what we would have done at UTT. We would have extracted about 900 snails, cracked them open, look at the cell size, about 9 centimeters, and within that egg sac, we would have come up with 150 to 200. It's all a function of the size of the snail in terms of how much egg capacity they can have. All right? Just case, the context of the pill there to show. It's very small, the egg, but there are lots of them in there, 1,200. Again, varying depending on the size of the snail. All right? So, wait, I'm going back. Just a minute. Right. Key point, threshold of 4 centimeters. Every time you see something that's looking like a matchbox, rest assured that is a breeder. You want to ensure that you're monitoring that they don't reach a point of being able to reproduce. 4.5, that's what you're concerned about, because at 4.5, 4 to 5 months after hatching, they're ready to breed. That's not a good thing in the context of how quickly they do so. So, as a gauge, use a matchbox size. You're seeing that in your yard, it's a problem. Seeing shells of the same size is going to be a problem because they're going to breed with each other. All right? So this is the seasonal dynamics. They don't disappear in the dry season. They don't die out. So we tend to have a problem in Trinidad. As soon as the rainy season is done, we head into dry season. It's no longer snail season. They estivate. They go into that type of state where they seal themselves into the shell and just wait until the rainy season comes again to reemerge. The problem we're having is that we need to adjust the amount of snails that are entering into the dry season. So when we look at the next slide, it's very difficult to see, but as soon as you enter into the rainy season, critical intervention 1, you start attacking the population with the intention of reducing the population entering the dry season. That's really what this is about. And again, it's all in rainy season. If you're to do that, that orange line will tell you that you're going to end up in the end of the rainy season with a low population of snails entering your dry season. And that's really and truly should be the ultimate goal. All right, again, the peak of the rainy season, high egg production. So I'm thinking about August, September, October. We're going to be having a lot of egg depositions. That's going to be a reality. All right, and this is where we need to focus at that particular juncture, that particular time, with the attention of ensuring that we don't have snails, a large number of snails, that is, entering the dry season. So remember we just spoke about, let me just go back, the rainy season. That's where the population is. Early, middle, late rainy season. And then we had a situation where January to February 2023, beginning of the dry season, it was a situation of good night, goodbye, good luck. We're here today talking about snails again, with the problem still occurring. All right? Yeah, with the problem with the good night, goodbye, good luck, with the problems of the snail still being present. So they do move 50 feet per night. So they could go down the road in about 5 days by a neighbor's place. We've tracked that at UTT using fluorescent nail polish. It's at our display table. And we use ultraviolet light. And we bake them, paint them up, and then we go looking after days to see where they're headed. Well, the literature says 50 feet per night. Where's a Trini snail? The situation is, it goes beyond that. Given the weather condition, the size of the snail, the bigger snails will obviously travel much further. And that's self-movement. Of course, we have the people moving it in their cars, their tractors, and floodwaters being part of it as well. This is what is happening, and this is what Ian referred to, you know. If you don't, it's going to spread. It's going to spread, it's going to spread, and it's a whole zone of infestation. And if you don't see about your business, oh, well, you can see about your business, but if your neighbor don't see about their business, it's going to be a problem for you again. It's going to research. What, in essence, the giant African snail is, the next thing after rat, cockroaches. The snail has now come into that next category of pests that households and farmers are treating with in a significant way. So in 2018, the students at UTT and myself, because we started to get excited about the snail since 2017, we went out into Orange Grove, and this is what was collected in one night. We physically went out, collected in Orange Grove, and had a big bonfire of celebration. All right? Now, here it is, that was 2018. In India, July 11, 2025, in Kerala. Of course, it's rainy season there. They have the umbrellas. they're having the same problem we're having, snails in the rainy season, the best approach is to collect them. Every one snail you pick up and destroy, you're literally destroying 1,200 potential offsprings. All right? So bait effectiveness and consumption efficiency, there's talk about repellents and so forth, but the aim is really and truly to get the snails, as much as possible, consume the bait to take it to its mortality, which will obviously lead to reduction in population. So this is a case where in Orange Grove they baited, and see the snails are all the same size. So that's one big breeding colony, right? They're all dead there, by the way, and as a result of baiting. Problem related to that was that the vessels of the snails were becoming vessels for mosquitoes. They were smelling really bad. The snails are nocturnal, the birds are daylight, but when they're dead or dying, they're out in the daylight, the birds are going to consume it. So there's some issues with regards to that. And when you bait, you try to collect the snails as well, you know, the dead snails. This is the problem we're having. And this was actually a video. That's the size of the bait, the mouth part. You could see the blue in the head. And what we need to do is try to break some of the bait into a smaller crumb-type structure. All right? So for the smaller size snails to be able to consume the bait. All right? So that is what happens. What we're seeing with regards to both the metaldehyde bait and also the iron phosphate bait is that batracs and non-target organisms are eating it. They're not going to die, though, because it's not the active ingredient that's going to kill them. But what it does do is that if you bait, and these batracs are toting these things away, there's less bait available for the consumption by the snail. All right? So we did an interesting experiment and came out as a result of work with the USDA looking for attractant. And they were looking for attractant. I was walking down the grocery shelf and I saw essences, and snails are prone to smells and so forth. And we decided to use a lot of essences, banana, coconut, lemon, and so forth, to increase the attractiveness of the snail to the bait. So we, put it out in the field, and this is what we saw. And the reality of that was that we saw, and these are students working on it and collecting, we actually have publications on those essences, that banana essence applied to the bait brings more snail to the bait. What is the benefit of that? Is that, one, the snails come out, they eat it much faster, you don't have less bait available, and it just confuses the whole space that they just focus on coming to that area. So you can use banana essence, or if not, you can sprinkle some banana soft drink, because it's basically the same essence type of thing, and it would work. And we've done it. And this is banana essence on the bait as well. The issue at hand is that we need to contain the infestation, contain it in your space so that it doesn't spread, ensure it doesn't leave your area, do some habitat manipulation strategies, suppressing the population through, again, adjusting the areas where they would more likely want to breed and live and reside. They have their place where they go to sleep at night, and at night and during the day. And remove those nesting sites and so forth. You want to eradicate. Timely baiting is important. Monitoring, very important. You check and see how effective your baiting strategy is. Look at the size of the snail. If you see the snails are getting smaller, you know your approach to baiting has worked. In that, you've destroyed the mother and father and your whole big family clan, the elder generation, and you're seeing the younger one emerge. That's a clear sign that you're doing something right once you start seeing the snails of a smaller size. Monitoring, we've done some work, preferential feeding habitats for the giant African snail. That's published work. And we've seen that certain crops, they tend to like more than others. So planting an oko plant in your crop as a trap crop would be an indicator crop. So when you think you have the snail, they tend to reside on those oko plants, and you could, engage your plan of action to treat with it. Again, community collective, same time coordinated action. What does that mean? Everybody has to come together and work. So if you're having a baiting program, it should be pegged and specific to hotspots at a time, as was mentioned by the ministry, and get everybody all on board, all the farmers within the community, to try to first at least get rid of the larger snails, and then baiting, and then the other end, lower end, the iron phosphate, that kind of thing, and some of the things that people are proposing. Again, the National Gas Action Plan, there was talk about this before, getting everybody involved, the CPEP, the URP, the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Agriculture, to treat with the overall and holistic control of the giant African snail. CPEP includes observe those abandoned communities, abandoned spaces within communities, and there's a thing called the red bag concept where people who are in residences who have snails and want to dispose of them, put them in a red bag. CPEP people will then pass and pick up the red bag specific for the disposal of the snail. Thank you very much. On behalf of the University of Trinidad and Tobago, I'd like to thank the University of the West Indies for engaging us to be a partner in this particular project. And I would just like to say we have posters like this on the outside if anybody's interested in having, as well as some short fact sheets as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ramdawa. His passion is obvious. Looking for snails even indoors as well. So it's always good to note the exciting and interesting and not terribly costly sorts of research that is possible to get some very interesting results. So thank you on behalf of you and your students and the work that you've been doing. I just have one little comment because I live up in Santa Cruz, and I think of my snails, not just being Trini, but are overeager because I've actually seen snails of different sizes doing the hanky-panky, okay? So maybe I should invite your students to come up to do some research there. So we're just biding a couple minutes. So what we will be having next is to hear now what interesting research is being done at the University of the West Indies, and we'll be having a joint presentation looking from pest to resource and innovative approaches to the risks and potential benefits of the giant African snail. And I'm stretching it a little bit as we wait for Dr. Vidya Degans and Dr. Keegan Jones to please come to the podium for your presentation. Thank you very much. Just be careful, huh?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, all established protocols observed. And please bear with me this evening. I'm having some issues with my voice, but don't get worried, it's not due to the giant African snail, just a bit of sinusitis, so just bear with me a bit. So, along with my colleague, Dr. Keegan Jones, we will be presenting briefly on the safety risk, public health risk associated with the giant African snail, and also possible utilization benefits of the giant African snail. And the overview of the presentation will include some chemical risks, physical risks, biological risk, and potential utilization as a novel resource. Now, regarding the chemical risk, so we would have heard from the previous speakers about metaldehyde. Metaldehyde is used to control the giant African snail. It has a high potency against the gas, giant African snail or gas. And some of the signs exhibited by the giant African snail when they consume the metaldehyde: reduced feeding, increased slime production, erratic movements, retraction and immobility, and that. And you'll see why later on I decided to mention some of the signs that are exhibited by the giant African snail when they consume the metaldehyde. Now, regarding while the metaldehyde is, the gas shows a high potency, right? With the metaldehyde, it's also a chemical risk to the environment, a chemical risk to non-target organisms such as pests, also to us humans, cause irritation of the skin, eyes, and also cause abdominal pain and convulsions. Regarding physical risk, we heard Dr. Ramdas spoke about the shells, right? The shell fragments are extremely sharp, can cause cuts and bruises. So we need to be careful when handling the shells. And a media release, the Ministry of Health, Government of Trinidad and Tobago, did issue a media release concerning the consumption of giant African snail. And we would have heard from a number of speakers before about the risk, the public health risk associated with the giant African snail, especially the rat lungworm. And there's an important note here that humans may become infected by ingesting raw or inadequately cooked snails, and we do support this as well. But we see the consumption of giant African snail is increasing in Trinidad and Tobago. There's anecdotal evidence. There's also evidence on social media platforms. You would have seen that. It's known also as considered a delicacy, not only in Trinidad and Tobago, but other parts of the world, right? And why consider utilization? Now, my colleague, Dr. Jones, will explain more about this. But why consider utilization? So despite the invasive status or nature of the gas, there's rising interest in novel-based resources. Potential for nutrition and food security, animal feed owing to the high protein content, value-added products. But it is extremely imperative that rigorous safety measures must be applied. Rigorous safety measures must be applied before any utilization of the giant African snail. And the main reason we would have been hearing this for the entire, time of this evening symposium, due to the rat lungworm, right? And also, the giant African snail can be a vector for other pathogens, pathogenic bacteria, such as Escherichia coli, right? Now, humans can become infected by ingesting any of these pathogens, the rat lungworm, right? If the product is undercooked. And I just have briefly the life cycle and potential routes of infection by the rat lungworm. So here we see when the snails consume the rat feces is what contains the rat lungworm, and the larvae can also infect land crabs, lizards. Some of us consume iguanas. And also, they can also infect certain vegetables. We consume raw and cooked vegetables as well. So the pathogens are not, that have been found in the gas or the giant African snail also infect vegetables and uncooked other form of meat as well. All right. So we also need to pay attention to that. Now, regarding food safety, public health, the World Health Organization has outlined key HACCP principles. And most of us here are familiar with HACCP principles, if not all of us, hazard analysis, critical control point. And there are 7 key HACCP principles, starting from hazard analysis, from number 1 straight on to documentation, record keeping, number 7. And emanating from the HACCP principles, there are 2 key procedures, cooking temperature and also purging. And cooking temperature of 100 degrees Celsius for approximately 5 to 10 minutes in some cases have been demonstrated to effectively render the rat lungworm and certain pathogens ineffective. Now, this is research has been conducted, and a number of research has been conducted. Science-based evidence, has demonstrated this. Also, there's a process called purging of the rat lungworm, and we will be hearing more about that later on. Now, regarding the SOPs or standard operating procedure emanating from the HACCP principles we just spoke about, there are basically 6 steps that has been recommended, right? Step 1, collection of the snails, and of course, the collection of live, intact, active snails, collection of snails not from garbage dump sites, pesticide sprayed areas. 2, initial cleaning, rinse under clean running water. And 3, purging snails, where the snails are collected, placed in controlled environment. They are fed 3 to 5 days on clean vegetables, right? All feces are removed. They are rinsed several times. Then there's a final rinse step and the boiling or the kill step, as we had mentioned earlier. All right, and then the post-boiling step, removal of snails, allowed to cool, and then the shells can be removed and the snail meat extracted. Now, way forward. So I'm seeing some faces, snail meat extracted and so on. All right, now we have, potential. The snail can be considered, it's consumed in all parts of the world, Africa, Nigeria, and so on. We would have seen the snail is known as escargot, as we had Dr. Ramdwa mention earlier, served in menus in certain restaurants. But as I mentioned before, that applying safety principles is really crucial. Preparation, temperature, preparation, time. And we at the University of the West Indies, Faculty of Food and Agriculture, in collaboration with UTT, Ministry of Agriculture, and other stakeholders, we have been in discussion with conducting and establishing science-based research as it relates to the public health risk of the giant African snail. So that's it for my aspect of the presentation. Thank you. And at this time, let's welcome Dr. Keegan Jones, who will continue.
So good afternoon all. Hope you're having a good afternoon. So Dr. DeGans would have, I was going to say, whet your appetite a bit for the utilization or the potential utilization that could be used. So I would try to further enhance your desire to utilize the giant African snail. So initially, just breaking it down into maybe 4 major steps. One of them will be, well, really my research area really focuses on animal feed and nutrition. So therefore it could be used as an alternative feed resource. As Dr. DeGans would have stated earlier, you have the meat, quote-unquote meat, as well as the shells. And as most livestock farmers will know, that the cost of feed is very high. Okay, so therefore if you're thinking about layers, if you're thinking about even pig production and so on, more monogastric production, you know that the meat itself is high in protein, high crude protein, maybe over like 35-40%. Some literature was stating that, as well as you have the shells as well. So for layer producers, out of you all have to buy grit and so on, which is very costly as well. So if you could utilize the shells as a supplement for grit, coming off of my research area, which is could also be used for like chemical, I'm not going to walk off this age. It could be used as, let me come on this side. It could be used for cosmetics. So for the young ladies and so on, it could be used for the cosmetic industry. There's also medicinal use. I think Dr. Ramadan did a lot of work in UTT with the slime and so on, the aminoglycans and so on. Yes, could be used for medicinal purposes. And then the major topic or talking point is where it could be utilized as a human food source, which I actually ate and I'm still alive. So therefore, we could say that maybe I have to wait. Maybe it's a chronic disease. So therefore, we have to be able to utilize it as a human food source. But again, what should be stated is that you should have proper public health measures, if you're utilizing or when you're cooking them, make sure you use proper gloves, make sure when you're collecting the snails are not being treated as Dr. Degan stated earlier, and therefore, because I ate it as a curry, it wasn't that bad. Okay, so it does have potential uses, but just remember that with everything, if risk is involved, you need proper procedure. Okay, it might be taboo, but again, we have to be able to utilize some of our pests to decrease the population in the wild. These are just some slides for feed utilization. You know, it could be pelleted and therefore fed to monogastrics, fishes, pigs, and so on. And then, obviously, what I was stating about before is really using animal feed. I went a bit in depth in it because that's my area where it could be used as a protein source, if you think about the meat, as well as a calcium or phosphorus source. If you're thinking about it with respect to, people might think that the snails would be ICU with having it in the animal feed, but also, again, we'll be using the same time and temperature measures, similar to what we'll do with human preparations to ensure that we destroy most pathogens, especially the intermediate hosts of the rat lungworm. So these are just more pictures. Again, I was trying to get the appetite going without falling off the stage. We have some servings, it looks like it's in tomatoes, as well as we have snail meal being used in animal feed and some cosmetic products. So I thank you for giving me attention and allowing me to speak on it. Please enjoy your night.
All right, so thank you very much, Dr. Degans and Dr. Jones. Dr. Jones, I spoke to him about this thing a couple days ago, and his response to me was, once you cook it, you could eat it, right? That's exactly what he said to me. But, I mean, I want to thank both of them for educating us on all the risks associated. And Dr. Degans probably said a million times in her presentation, we have to ensure that it is safe. So it is not something where the University of the West Indies and UTT is saying, go and eat snail or go and use it for that. So I just wanted to make that clear. I see Prof. Joseph is laughing here. I hope that when we send our bill for cleanup on them two plant pot, they sort us out as well, right? All right, great. So now we're moving on to a different sort of perspective. We were hearing from researchers, persons who would have done work on the giant African snail. But the organizing committee thought it will also be very useful to hear a farmer's perspective, right? To understand what they deal with on the ground and to hear their experiences. So I want to now invite to the stage, Ms. Daitri Rampasad, somebody who is a farmer that works in many different aspects. She has been present in almost a lot of the consultations that I go to. I see her. So she's very aware and very informed. So the floor is now yours.
Do I want it here or do I want to risk walking on the stage? Put it back here?
I'll risk not walking on
Okay,
the stage
let me
and
help
stay
you.
one. I might be a little more clumsy than Mr. Abdul.
All right, just make sure.
Yeah.
You good?
Yes. Okay. Good evening, everyone. All protocols observed. Thank you all again for being here, and thanks to the Faculty of Food and Agriculture for inviting me to participate in this evening's session. I have to say this has been one of the most interesting sessions I've attended. And I've been attending these sessions for the past, 8 years or so. This would have been since I was a member of the Agricultural Society of Trinidad and Tobago in 2017. And my engagement, though I'm not there anymore, my engagement with agriculture and consultations and work on a national and regional level still continues. So, without further ado, let me just share a little bit of my experience with the giant African snail. Like I was saying, this has been one of the most interesting conversations that I've been a part of since the beginning of my journey, so to speak, in the agriculture sector as a stakeholder on the national level. I'm very happy to say that I'm very pleased that we're finding ways to
rather than talk about the negative impacts or the lack of resources that the ministry has. And I have been a member of the Giant African Snail Task Force. So I have sat in meetings for 2 hours listening to the ministry complain, or persons from the ministry complain of the lack of resources, the fact that the timing in which snails come out to feed and whatnot does not coincide with the time in which they are employed to work, and the ministry refuses to pay for additional labor, or they refuse to pay for overtime salaries. And so they themselves, although passionate to bring a solution to the issues, are constrained by the lack of resources. Because these snails come out, one, either very early in the morning when the temperatures are cool, or late in the evening, or when it's overcast and rainy. Problem with baiting during the day when it's overcast and rainy is that the bait just washes away. And at night, if you are to bait in the night, well, of course, our ministry personnel is not allowed to work at night. I don't give them wrong, they're not paid to work at night. Don't ask them to work when they're not being compensated. So as a farmer, the giant African snail has been of tremendous significance in terms of being a pest. As being a farmer myself, I could tell you there are times when we plant lettuce, pak choy. Oh my gosh, pak choy is the worst. Pak choy, bodhi, pumpkins, vine crops. And there's nothing you could do sometimes. You feel at a loss. You plant, let's just say 25 crates this afternoon, because we're not going to plant during the day in the hot sun. 25 crates in the afternoon. By the time you come back the next day, if you find 4 crates survive, you find plenty. It is of serious concern. It's not a joke. And the pictures that Mr. Ramdor showed of Orange Grove, that was not exaggerated. I've been there in Orange Grove. And that was just, I think that was an under-exaggeration of the issue that they dealt with back in 2017, 2018, because it was very, very rampant. And you had farmers that would plant today, they go back tomorrow morning, there is nothing. And this happened for months. I think the situation has eased a bit now, thankfully with, public awareness from the Ministry of Agriculture and, farmers being proactive in terms of not depending on the ministry to get bait or to do these things. And they just took matters into their own hands. Even for me personally, I have seen a reduction in the snail population. And I think somebody mentioned that in the dry season, the snails go away or they die. No, thank you, Mr. Ramdor, for iterating that. They do not die. They just basically hibernate until the rain comes out again. And there is no snail season, there is no rainy season, nor dry season. So we will have faced this problem continuously, year-round. Climate change is a real issue. It doesn't just affect flooding. It affects everything. And we have seen, since 2008, when we first seen it, the snails will come out when it rains. And like I said, there's no dry or rainy season anymore. So yes, you may have periods where rain is not very prevalent, but you're going to have rainfall, and they're going to come out. The ground may remain saturated for a while. They're going to come out, they're going to feed, they're going to mate, they're going to reproduce. The problem will become more and more consistent. And there is a need to deal with the issue. And like Mr. Mohammed would have said, everybody is constrained for resources. And I'm very happy that that was one of the keywords tonight, resources. And roles. What is the roles of every stakeholder in this? Because agriculture, food, safety, ecosystems, natural environment, it affects everybody. And in terms of the roles of government, the role of local government, the roles of institutions, the roles of farmers, the role of householders, where do we stand? What are we willing to do to be a part of the solution as opposed to the problem? Now, a lot of things come back to law enforcement, and policy. However, I feel like the only thing this country really enforces well in terms of laws is our traffic violations and our traffic laws. Because very little is being done in terms of enforcement of anything else. And there are a lot of loopholes when it comes to our laws, even when we talk about things on a local government, because somebody brought up the topic before me of empty lots and vacant plots that has overgrown bushes, nobody takes care of it. And these are the concerns that even when I was a member of the task force, these were the concerns that the members of that task force were concerned about, because they could be baiting where somebody is calling, but the snails are continuously coming from these vacant plots. So what are we really doing? Where's our local government in terms of all of this? And their concern was that if the local government were to cut the grass or something goes wrong, these owners are going to show up. All the time the land has no owner. They do something, or the owner shows up immediately. So, I mean, there are a lot of things that I think our local government really needs to take a charge to do things, really be given possibly a little bit more power and enforcement to really take charge of the situation. Because to be honest, they are the ones that are more on the ground. Our Ministry of Agriculture really is strained in terms of their labor force. They cannot, I think their task force, not the task force, the team they had back when I was at task force was 3 members. How could we manage a giant African snail invasion in Trinidad and Tobago with 3 members? Another topic I want to talk about is food safety. A lot of the crops that we produce locally are consumed without cooking. It's mostly salad crops and salad type crops. So yes, my colleague would have mentioned that a cooking time of 10 to 15 minutes at 100 degrees Celsius. Are we going to pass lettuce through that temperature? Yeah, we might pass tomato through it to make some tomato choker or some roast tomato. But what about lettuce? Sometimes we eat pak choy as it's grown. Kale is eaten raw. Are there any other solutions in terms of any other methods by which we could sanitize these foods? Because is simply washing in a bleach solution enough? I mean, that's just some of my questions. And, you know, in terms of food safety as well, there's another thing that came to mind. In a previous engagement with Mr. Ramdo, he brought up a topic. I'm surprised he didn't touch on it today, but the metaldehyde in terms of getting into our groundwater. So yes, we could bait, we could use those things, but to what detriment? Because if, when Mr. Ramdo tested our groundwater in Orange Grove, where we had significant giant African snail infestation, and farmers would have taken it upon themselves to purchase this metaldehyde bait, which is effective, it then got into our groundwater. That is then the same water that we're using to irrigate our crops. So what are we doing? What is the solution? What is the long-term solution? The question remains, are we still trying to eradicate the snails? Or are we trying, or is it going to be a long-term solution in terms of trying to find ways to work with these snails? I mean, I like the idea of eating them. Not me personally, I'm a vegetarian. But, you know, I mean, there were rumors that the snails first came into the country because somebody wanted to sell it as a delicacy. And I mean, this rumor has been going on for years. So, I mean, if that was the case of having these snails in the country, why not just do it? Like my colleagues here would have done the research, 10 to 15 minutes cooking time at 100 degrees Celsius, time temperature relation, and there are a lot of things that affect us, even from a food safety perspective. Some people like their steaks medium rare or rare. There's a high risk of E. coli contamination with those things. Does that prevent us from eating it? No. So, I mean, perspective. I know in the past when the government, when the ministry, when the snails became first prevalent, the ministry did have a perspective where it was dangerous, do not handle it, call them. For good reason. Their thoughts and perspective at that time were valid and relevant. However, times have changed. It's in our national interest. And I think the perspective needs to change. And with outreach and public knowledge, I am happy that this event has taken a toll in terms of bringing new light to a problem that we've faced for years. 2018 till now, that's 17 years, right? And we're now talking about eating snails on a national level. It is time. It's time to change the perspective and change the narrative in terms of how we see things. So I'll just wrap up there. I think my time is up. So again, thank you so much, everyone, and I guess have an enjoyable evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rampersad. It's also important to note it's not all about the hard-hitting science, but the reality of life, and it's interesting to hear all of the perspectives and to see the extent of the issue and the problems, particularly as it relates to food security, not just biosecurity. It's not a you problem, it's not a TT problem, it's a we problem. With that, Ms. Rampersad had lots of questions, which is an excellent segue to the next and final section for the program, which is our open forum, our panel discussion, which will be headed and moderated by Professor Mark Woodivera. And we will have several of our panelists, which is Dr. Keegan Jones, Dr. Vidya Dagans, Dr. Marcus Ramdawa, hopefully in a chair, Mr. Ian Mohammed, and Dr. Amran. With that, can you speak, panelists, please come onto the stage. Professor Woodivera, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. The president of UTT, Professor Joseph, we're happy to still have you here. And to all of us that are here, I believe you are already excited about what you have heard. And I have some questions here, some questions that I prepared to ask the panelists. But I thought that probably I should allow you to ask the questions, because I know there must be some burning questions after listening to all that have been said. Yeah? So can we take questions? Let's open up and... Anybody? Yeah, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. Professor, presenters, thank you for such a wonderful presentation. But we do have a real problem before us, and the problem is our food security. The problem is our inability to export, even to the region, our foods. The problem is we are now embarking on e-commerce transactions, which means that the trade of agricultural produce is now happening in a virtual space. You sometimes do not know what you are buying. You're depending on the credibility of the farmer to pack a product for you, but when it reaches your processing facility, it is not usable because there are traces of snails. There are small snails, which means the entire shipment has to be disposed of. It is leading to a lot of commercial losses, food losses, as well as losses to commercial trade opportunities. And I beg of the scientists in this room to let us find a quick solution, because it is really impacting our ability to trade food, and it's impacting our ability to meet Vision 2030.
Thank you. That sounds like a non-difficult question. So let's let's hear from the panelists. Anybody can, just respond to the question that we have heard on trade, on resources, and e-commerce. Is that on? Press and hold it.
All right, yeah, that's in truth, in fact, a real issue. And as I would have recalled, farmers who would be specifically pegged to catering to the export market, there should be some measure through maybe NAMDEVCO. I remember some time ago there was the GAP certification program. And again, we need to really and truly protect our export markets and ensure that through the extension services, and I hope I'm not putting my foot in my mouth when I say that the extension officers and those that are attached to NAMDEVCO as well need to ensure at least there's some good compliance with the pushback of the snails in those areas to protect the crop that is targeting an export market. So I think it's, again, as the ministry said, we're all responsible. These farmers would obviously be planning a crop with the intent to export, and recognize that challenge that would possibly lead to a loss of money. So the reality is that those protocols must be established for those farmers to be able to put those things in place to safeguard our export.
Can we just hold on, CEO, so that...
If I may add as well, there are farmers who are using this snail bait. Unfortunately, when the products, you're talking about anywhere between 1,000 to 2,000 bundles of dashing bush at a processing facility to find one snail in a bundle of dashing bush. It leads to poor credibility of the entire field. And then you have farmers that are saying, I am using this snail bait. Where did that come from? Because innocent to them, they do not know a lot of things. Maybe the intensity of the bait, maybe the vehicle they were using, but it leads to a lot of losses, and our farmers are really feeling the effect of it.
Yeah, so just to build on that, I would expect that if a farmer is supplying, as you say, dashing bush and all these things like that, there would be the checks and balances in terms of what is coming to the packing house and so on. The use of the snail bait does not eliminate the presence of a snail on the produce or whatever it is. It requires checking the produce, maybe, and things can slip through. But the bait is not the solution for that. So, we all know that. The bait itself is just to basically control your population, whatever it is. Dashing bush, those kind of environments, you will get those snails, but the onus will be on the farmer to do that. I don't know if maybe the farmers feel if there some protocols established with treating it before it goes with some solution. I don't know. These are things that maybe we need to look at. The farmer may need to incorporate that. If it is a business, if it is that he's supplying it, that is something to be looked at. Maybe he has to add an extra step in how he's, packing it. I'm just saying that is something that needs to be probably looked at with him or her.
If I'm talking too much, please tell me, right?
Yeah. Go ahead.
But, okay, so Mr. Mohammed, let's look at the food safety aspect of it. And Dr. Ramdwa, respected professors, please let me know. Is the slime a food safety risk? If the slime ends up on food, is it a risk to the person consuming it?
Yes, it is a risk.
And it is a
Yes,
risk. And
it is a risk.
sometimes
The
we
slime is a
cannot
risk.
see the slime. Maybe
Yes.
it dries. Maybe that food is going to the school feeding program. Maybe that food is going to a hospital or an institution. So what is the solution to our farmers? If it is that the bait is how you said it, Mr. Mohammed, the bait is a mechanism to reduce the population. So what advice do we give to our farmers now to say, if you are producing a crop for a hospital, a school feeding program caterer, an export market, how do you protect that food from being rejected at the packing house?
I want to just say that when it comes to things like lettuce and crops which are going to be consumed, which are not going to be subjected to that heat type of treatment, there are some food-grade sanitizers, and that's what we need to start looking at. For example, what you're saying is quite accurate. We have seen even in the market space purchasing lettuce. I've heard of situations that even at restaurants that the snails is finding itself in the lettuce. Again, something that we will not cook. But the reality is that the protocols and the conversations need to occur for creating the SOP, the standard operating procedures, to how we now treat with lettuce and those type of commodities that are not going to be subjected to heat. There are available food grade sanitizers, inclusive of light therapy as well, that can at least reduce the risk on those type of commodities.
Okay, let's hear from another CEO.
Good afternoon. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Prof. And congratulations once more to the panel and for your respective presentations. I just wanted to hear from you and also to express my concern with placing excessive liability on the farmers. I want to say for those farmers that access credit, their debt repayment is built upon their projected cash flow. Loss of income from what we heard earlier on, 45 crates in the ground, you barely have 4 crates tomorrow. That farmer has to incur that loss. They are still subject to, while there may be some remedial strategies to bring the loan back to performance status, they are still liable. And therefore, the limited resources that we have, I cannot endorse the call to have those resources expanded in whatever way we can. And even for Dr. Ramdor, the strategies of having more awareness on what can we do to have at least some sort of treatment for consumables, leafy vegetables, and so on, because at least those farmers can earn the income to deal with their matters of credit. They are still liable. In the instances where we have farmers borrowing to plant these crops, they have to also maintain that, but that does not convert to any sort of income unless they can reach a mature level of production and dispose of it to earn that income to generate cash flows. If there is a disruption in that and they replant and that continues, the liability, the intensity of the liability continues for that farmer. And we are saying we are limited on resources. Yes, we can restructure possibly the borrowing, but if all of the areas of responsibility is placed on the farmer, then who are we overwhelming? We are overwhelming our primary producers. We have to take note of that, and I'm very concerned with particularly farmers who access credit and their ability to sustain those credit and maintain their credit rating if we have this type of disruption to their projected cash flows.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to, I don't know if I will be able to address your question and her question. For the farmers, home grade solutions like salt in water can help, vinegar can help. More so, we would encourage these farmers to inspect. Because I went to a farm in Wallerfeet some years back, about 2 years ago, when I was told about the infestation, just to have a look. And I realized that all the vegetables, like she said, most of our vegetables, like salads, are not cooked. And I saw snails on most of the pak choy, cucumber, lettuce, cabbage. And what came to my mind is that, so everybody is afraid of this snail. At the end of the day, this could be one of the vegetables I am buying in the market. Yes. So I explained to the lady, you cannot eradicate this just yourself alone. We have to adopt strategies. So first of all, I don't think salt is that expensive, for the price of the lettuce to increase further. So it could be somewhere we can look into. Salt solution, vinegar, these are home items that can help. Just a bowl or a basin, soak it or dip it for a few minutes and rinse before it goes to the market. That will help.
But Dr. Honor, just to further this discussion, how much, if you are a small scale, I mean, not a small scale, if you are a medium scale farmer to a large scale farmer, how much of salt would you be using? Considering the magnitude of the issue that we are talking about. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to point out that salt is in fact an issue in agricultural lands. You don't want to put too much salt, so that is a huge risk factor to put salt in soil, especially if it is you're going to be expecting to cultivate a crop in there. Yeah. But I want to just go back to the question that, or the theme that you propose about the fact that farmers are now faced with a serious challenge. The challenge is that they plant a crop, they tend to lose out, especially now where they're getting money to fund that crop. And the crop risk assessment, unfortunately, seems to be is going to be included in the criteria to obtain a loan from the ADB, because you have to now determine not if you're planting in a flood zone or not, but do you have snail? And that's now going to be a serious issue because, the tolerance for snail is zero. There's a zero tolerance for the snail. So if you have a certain population of snail, about 3 or 4 per square feet, that runs a big risk. So the reality is now, more than ever, when they come to ADB for loan, they have to find out if you have snails on what are the plans to mitigate against the impact of the snails on their crop. It's sad that we are now in a situation where that is a reality.
Okay, thank you. Let's get some questions from the... you still have something to say?
Just to add to what Dr. Ramdor is saying, the risk profile has to be redefined, and therefore it's not just about the salt, it's about the labor, the entire restructuring of the cost of production models, and that is a useful tool at the ADB. We do have it for 56 commodities, but that, as well as your map that you presented, those areas, we will now have some geographic classification of risk for commodities under production. And again, the liability is on the farmer if that type of risk classification is done. So that too is an area for research, and maybe you all can consider it either of the universities, but encourage the students to look at it.
And that's very important. From this discussion, it is clear that research is important in this very area. Because using any chemical, of course, salt is a chemical as well. It has its environmental effect. As a soil scientist, I can tell you, when you add salt, you are adding sodium chloride. You are adding sodium particularly, which is, as a soil physicist, I will tell you the physical effect that sodium has on the soil, because sodium has a dispersive effect. So which means it is going to disperse the soil and undermine the aggregation of the soil, porosity of the soil. It is going to affect a number of things. So any chemical that we are using, of course, there is an attendant effect on either human health, on environmental health, on the ecosystem, and on our waters and so on. So those are things that we must research on. Let's hear from you. Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your presentations thus far. My concerns, seeing the presentations and hearing the presentations from farmers, etc., and looking at some of the pictures up there where we are seeing open fields with snails, along rows, cultivated rows, etc. I am speaking from the perspective of non-productive estates and forested areas. I remember visiting a farm, an abandoned farm during the COVID time where a friend was trying to resuscitate said farm. And I was astounded at seeing the mounds, and I do mean high mounds of piles of snail shells, of this giant African snail. And that was the first time that it came to me that what a problem this was, looking at this particular farm. The caretaker's house was literally enveloped, all the eaves, you're seeing snails in the eaves, on the roof, etc. The family's children had already been affected by meningitis because the children were playing with these things as pets, etc., as someone mentioned. I'm also speaking from the perspective of being connected to the coal mine, San Grande area, where friends of mine, family members, etc., are beginning to complain about being enveloped by snails, etc. There are several non-productive estates, in the area. The houses and the people who live there are on the edge of forested areas where there's no control of these, etc. Overgrown areas. What are the strategies then for areas such as these? I mean, open fields are one thing, but forested areas and non-productive estates are tangles of bushes and clumps of trees, etc., all naturally growing, but there's an undergrowth, etc. How are you? What's your strategy for dealing with snails in areas like these?
Panelists, strategies for dealing with snail in forested areas. Anybody?
Okay. First again, forested areas. When we define forest area in terms of what a real forest is, we don't really have a snail population in there, and that's quite good because of the anteaters and some of the predatory organisms that reside within the actual forested areas. Those things that are brush and secondary forested areas and so forth. I mean, I wouldn't consider the woods a forested area per se. The reality is that again, it comes back down to enforcement of legislation by local government in terms of those abandoned spaces, and again, the establishment of policies, again, national policies with regard to the holistic management of the giant African snail. Your concern is real. It occurs. It also doesn't only occur from those abandoned plots that or those areas or estates. It occurs even in a farmer's community where one farmer has planted a crop. He has reaped his best crop. He walks away. He leaves his residual plants there, the tomato plants. It produces fruit that he's no longer going to harvest, and the snails flourish. I next door to him, and I now starting my crop. Imagine the challenge I have. I'm going to bait, but he has an army that is going to come over to me just now. But the reality is, it's a conversation, and we need to address it in the holistic national giant African snail action plan, establishing policies to address that very said thing that you've spoken of, the abandoned estates, and how do we treat with mitigating that. In Florida, because in 2018, as part of the Greater Safeguarding Initiative, we received funding from the USDA. We went to Florida, and there were some serious penalties for individuals who chose not to treat with the snail. And there was also enforcement by the GAS team, the Giant African Snail team. But actually in Florida, they don't call it GAS, they call it GALS, the Giant African Land Snail. And they went in. You couldn't ask, you no longer have to have permission for treating an area that is, overpopulated with snails. You just get in. It's similar like a SOE. We need our SOE for the snails. If the police could go in and do what they do, we need to do in for the snails and go into a space that somebody's not treating with and deal with it. And there's also a cultural dimension of this, because there's some communities, religious communities, that believe that the snail is good luck, and they refuse to treat with it. It happened in Florida. I'm seeing it happening here in some instances where people leave them alone. But the reality is not just the slime. We speak about the slime, but the fecal matter, once dries, becomes particulate airborne matter. That can also lend itself to problems as well. All right.
Oh, thank you. Please introduce yourself first. I think it's important. The first person that spoke would have been the CEO of Nandevco, Mrs. Nirmala Debbie Singh, and then the second person will be the CEO of ADB, Mrs. Wendy Sam Sudha Bihari. The third person, I'm not sure. Thank you.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Nigel Grimes, I'm a consultant with MEATID Training Institute. Probably addressed to Marcus, as Marcus has been doing a lot of research. Marcus, from my experience working in different places before, the role of an integrated pest management approach, or an integrated approach. Has any research been done on the use of neem extracts or neem-based products? I know neem as an anti-feedant also has been represented as a maloxicide. And therefore, just to find out if any research has been done utilizing neem. And I know CEO would have mentioned that if it is a repellent, may be placed in and around your lettuce fields or pak choy fields, etc., may be a strategy that can be combined with the use of the bait, etc. So just posing this question to you.
Okay, so we've done a lot of work, and at the University of Trinidad and Tobago, we've explored looking at the snail from a multifaceted approach, even control strategies. To answer your question specifically about neem, we have explored it, and what we've seen is similar to something called a damming effect, like a watercourse. You would dam a watercourse, and you can't do that as a pushback or repellent to a farmer's crop. You would get some pushback as probably a secondary line of defense, because the first line should be initially the baiting. Using that as a repellent could foreseeably work. But the reality is with any dam, when you push back and the dam breaks, the population comes even larger. So the impact is first to do the population reduction in terms of what your strategy in terms of farmers who are experiencing this, and see how best you can integrate. And I do believe in the integration of the repellents and the anti-feedants, but the reality is we have to be very careful that we don't create a monster out of the pests in doing that. So population reduction, then, again, there is need for creating that pesticide or treatment protocol. And that, again, is part of the whole possible research agenda that we look at, and just not using the metaldehyde, which has serious threats. Ms. Ramprasad's book, I did do a presentation, The Looming Threat of Metaldehyde, because if you recognize metaldehyde, we never had the use of bait so much so until the snail came to Trinidad. Our environment was pretty much clear and clean of metaldehyde. When snails came, a new pesticide came onto the market like ever before, and that was metaldehyde. And yes, the ministry is now looking at dealing with the iron phosphate. It's not as good as or as great as the metaldehyde. It does work, but at the same time, we need to explore, look at the research and see exactly what is going to be a best protocol for engagement for the management of the snails, to include that neem product, which is emerging. It's emerging. I'm seeing it all. I'm seeing it at different pesticide companies, but I mean, we're not endorsing any pesticide company until we have seen the actual research outcome or output of it. I've done it. I'm not at liberty to discuss that here because I don't want to, create any sort of issue with any company related to the use of these organic neem-based products.
Thank you. Let's. Okay, there's somebody at the back there. Just introduce yourself and.
Hi, good evening. I'm Ched Taylor. I'm a concerned citizen. I was wondering if there was any research done into control methods concerning like microorganisms, for instance, instead of pesticides. Maybe there's something to use like that, like a natural, if there's any like natural predators of the snail or anything that could like attack the eggs or anything like that.
Okay, natural predators and use of microorganisms for control. Anybody?
Okay, again, at the University of Trinidad and Tobago, again, we've done some significant work.
I hope the other panelists are awake.
And, you would see that in the community, the poultry community, they would speak of the guinea fowl, and that seems to be a very good biological control organism. You think about that, it's hard to contain them in one space. They get all over the place, I'll tell you something very uniquely, and we have a publication on it, which speaks to the firefly. The firefly, which we know as the candle fly, we know the things that blink in the night. And by accident, we came across the larva of that fly. The larva, the development stage of it, being very aggressive in the attack of the giant African snail at all stages. It was very amazing when we first saw it because we thought it was very unique that something was actually, feeding on this thing. There's a publication on it. You can just Google our name and see, the firefly larva and the giant African snail, and you would see the really interesting association between this particular larva and the snail and how very useful it is. The problem is, it's a firefly larva. It's not going to work in an agriculture zone because there's spraying pesticide there. In order for it to work, it has to be in kind of like an agroecological zone or residential space where you're not much use of pesticides. And then there's a association with the Royal Bougainvillea, because in that publication it speaks to that, and it being habitat for the firefly and producing the firefly larva. So you can check that publication out and see. And you would see, but again, the implications of putting that into action is kind of hard. So the reality is, one, humans are the best predator, and two, that the guinea fowl is, and I will say also chickens, but chickens only eat this very small snailets, the neonates, but when you look at the larger size snails, they aren't able to deal with it, but then lies the use of the guinea fowl that would knock out every part of the life cycle.
Thank you. There was, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Amanda Ali. I'm a veterinarian. My question was kind of bouncing off his question about integrated pest management and natural predators, but you basically answered that question. My concern more right now is about bioaccumulation of the pesticides and how this will affect the food web on the whole. Is the giant African snail displacing other animals that would normally be herbivores, other herbivorous animals that would feed on crops? Are they displacing populations of animals? What's going on there? How is it affecting the food chain, the food cycle? Where does it fit into that? I know you mentioned the natural predators, and well, it's an invasive species now because we don't have that. We don't have a predator that would control that population. So what about the idea of something like competitive exclusion? Is there something we can introduce that could outcompete the snail?
All right.
That's just a bit of how I'm thinking about it, because I'm concerned about the overuse of the pesticides, the bioaccumulation, not only for animals, but for us as well, and our health.
So from irrigation, if you have an invasive species, it means that you're going to be invaded by all kinds of chemicals as well. And of course, it brings that problem that she's talking about. What happens to the food chain? That's the question, right?
Okay, so I don't want to, it's not that I'm an expert on it. I understand what you're asking. And one always has to be careful. When we talk about use of biologicals or use of an entomopathogen to control something else, we always have to be wary of that in itself does not become invasive and has an impact on something else, right? So with the giant African snail, nematodes, worms, those things have been known to, but they end up becoming invasive and then impacts negatively on another commodity or aspect. At present, from what we are seeing in the distribution and the whole, how the population of the snail is operating, it is just going up and down. So it's just peaks and valleys, and it's just people basically living with the snail. That's what it is. The farmer's impact, again, is something that obviously needs to be addressed. But at present, it is an ongoing thing. That's all I can say with regards to that.
All right. I just want to hear from Dr. Jones, Dr. Digans, and Dr. Honor. How do we balance, with all that has been said, Probably this should have been the final question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How do we balance between control, utilization, and even ecosystem health, as from what we have discussed? How do we? What do you think we should do? In your own, we just want to hear your own take on this.
Thank you, Chair. Well, from my perspective, being a veterinarian is one of my first lines of work, as well as in livestock, I would want to utilize it appropriately. So, for example, I know the baitings and so on are very good, but if we could have maybe, researchers to start off with, as well as people in the community, just like how we collected and you destroyed them, if we could put some value towards, or even it could be an integrated system where you have some farmers who have livestock as well as farmers who have crops. So therefore, from your crop fields, you remove the snails and then put it towards use in a public health way, make sure it's safe, and they utilize it. And that, I believe, that will actually maybe decrease the population, it will decrease the use of chemicals as well. The only problem is just it will be labor intensive initially. But once we could have a community effort, because it has to be a community effort as well, community effort, and also targeting, coming down to the One Health approach, as well as targeting decreased chemicals in the soils and in the waters, that type of utilization. So we're not saying, you're joking about eating it. Eating it is one perspective, but if you have a production system, you're rearing livestock as well as crops, you may be have the solution to it halfway. Okay, so therefore you could collect the shells, maybe you could have it in a drum or so, you boil it and so on. As again, it will be labor intensive initially, and you yourself destroy the shells and so on, and then you could start to distribute it to farmers who want grit, or maybe you have a layer population. So sometimes the answer is in front of us in a weird way, but just we have to make sure that the standard SOPs are being operationalized so that we don't have any public health issues. But that's just my take, Chair. Thank you.
So I would say utilization can also influence control. Right now, we are more concerned about the negatives, and I'm so happy that we have this forum to talk about other benefits. There's so much we could gain from the giant African snail, and it's a communal effort. It's and where I come from, we are almost like the natural predators. Yes, because you can't get the snail on the streets, in the farm, in the bushes right now. It didn't start overnight. It's something that happened over some years. And the snail museum business is over $1.2 billion US. The snail market by 2030 we get towards $3 billion US. So there's money in the shell, there's money in the slime, there's money in the blue blood, there's money in the meat. Everywhere you go, they are like an exotic delicacy, and they call it escargot. On your menu, you see escargot, just know it's snail. So don't think it's one fancy meat that you want to buy. It's the snail in your backyard. So in trying to utilize, like my colleague said, we are also controlling it because people are afraid. And the PAMSEC mentioned something, the word I like to use, demystify the situation. So that we are not so afraid. We are not so frightened because people cringe when you talk about the giant African snail. So I think we can control it communally. Everybody now needs to understand that there's a different aspect. We will try, and I don't think it's going to go away because of how it reproduces. Another thing is to tackle what Dr. Radwa said, the seasons when they reproduce most or when they come out. They are nocturnal animals. They feed in the night, they move in the night. Once it drizzles or it's cool, they come out. And they are moisture dependent. So even their bodies require moisture to stay alive. The moment the sun comes and the weather is dry, they desiccate. Or they find a place to burrow and hibernate. So if we can maybe use your gloves if you are afraid. If you are allergic to anything shell, do not handle it. Use a glove, use something to handle it, and maybe by the time we finish, I don't think this is the end of this symposium. It's not. This is just the beginning. There's so much we want to unveil and unravel, so that at the end of the day, some of those $1.2 billion US in the slime, because a lot of somebody came to my office 2 weeks ago looking for one modern Caribbean office. He wants to buy slime. I don't know. I never knew they were selling snail slime in that place. In Trinidad and Tobago, I was shocked that he requested for it. And I was telling somebody, this is the same snail slime that everybody's afraid to touch. People use it for your ligaments, skin regeneration, everything. So this is not the first. This is just the start of this symposium where we are going to unravel. There are researchers, there are experts who are going to go into different aspects of the snail, and at the end of the day, the farmers will be happy. And the snail, by the grace of God, I will guarantee you, in a short space of time, it's a matter of years, we will not be seeing it like the way we are seeing it today.
Thank you, Dr. Honor. I remembered, let me just tell you a short story. I remembered last year, in December, I was invited to deliver a public lecture somewhere in Africa, in a university. And when I got there, I went with my wife, who is sitting right there. So when we got there, and they said, okay, we're organizing a field trip for you before the public lecture. And we went out to a field trip. Where did we end in that field trip? It was, they called it a snailry. That was a snail farm, Giant African Snail farm. And we got there, and they started explaining to me, what is done, and you could see the production system, very scientific production system. It was actually owned by the university. And so we got in, and they were just holding the snails, and I was scared. I said, but this is something that is dangerous. How? They said, no, Prof, just, it's nothing. I gingerly put my hand, and I was able to hold one, and I'm still alive. I gingerly, but that was not the end of it. My wife was not there on that field trip. That was not the end of it. Then they took us to a nice shed and so on. And I saw one of the pictures that you showed, and it was a nice dish that was prepared. And they said, okay, Prof, we are going to eat it. Just wait for some time. If we don't drop dead, you can try it. And I'm telling you, I tried it. And I took some to the hotel, and I gave my wife, and she ate it. But in this case, it was produced in a controlled environment. It was not something that was, just walking around. And the snail, and if you look at our, what do you call it? Our flyer, you will see it on somebody's hand. And in one of the interviews, I was asked, but this is not a good handling, method. Why do you have, and you are showing it on somebody's hand? I said, this is just to demonstrate that the snail by itself is not harmful. It is just a vector when it comes in contact with a contaminated environment of course, just like any other animal, it picks those things. If you have a contaminated environment and you send your goat there to feed, it will, it is going to pick up on all the dangerous organisms that would have been in that environment and so on. So I hope you're not looking at me somehow because I ate it. And Dr. Jones also ate it, and Dr. Onadu. Of course, he grew up eating it. Any final, I think the moderator will still have time? Okay, yeah, there's another question there, and then the next one right there. Go ahead.
Hey, good night. So my name is Vishram Bikari. I am representing Miatid. So my question is to Dr. Ramdoa. You showed the graph, where we know when is a specific time that they are laying the eggs. And we know that, and based on reading as well too, although the snails consume the metaldehyde, they can still reproduce and lay the eggs or excrete the eggs even after they die. And we already established that the size of the pellets would not be, the immature ones, they cannot eat or consume the size of the pellet. My question to you is how or what measures we can do to kill the eggs, because we're trying to control the adults, and to me, the eggs, we try to get them from the source. The eggs probably may be easier to control. What measures do you suggest to do that? And there are research where you can use neem as well to reduce the hatchability of the eggs, something that we probably could look into in the future. So I don't know what, can I respond, please?
Yeah, sure. So your question speaks to the eggs, the quantity of eggs being deposited. So I want to just be sure that that's what you're speaking of, the quantity of eggs being released, right?
And how to control, if you can control the eggs, what can we do at that point?
Okay, the best way to control the eggs is to control the adult before they get to the size to be able to lay the eggs. That's my response. We relate it to like weeds. If you have a weed plant, you want to make sure that that weed plant doesn't flower to shed its seed. Likewise, we need to adopt the approach to looking at the snail and pushing back the population to the point where they're not yet going to go into the reproductive phase. Some people say that the snails go into the dry season, they estivate, as I would have pointed out. When they go into that dry season, they're going in empty, meaning that they have to retract into their shell, they pull themselves tightly in, and they shut the door. They can't do that without the eggs. So before they enter into the dry season, they're going to empty the eggs. What they're going to do, however, is retain from their last meeting the ability of viable sperm, so that as soon as they sense that the rain is going to come in June, they start beginning the internal egg production process. So to answer your question, keep the snails small. That's how you know you're going to push back and reduce the population.
Thank you. There was another question there, then we go to the gentleman in the middle there.
Yeah, my name is Dr. Iwu. All our efforts towards managing the giant African snail has been mainly towards control. I'm just going to digress a little. The lionfish is an invasive species. I think it's native to Indo-Pacific and Red Sea. When it entered the Caribbean, it was a big problem until the local population were educated on, first of all, how to benefit from the lionfish in terms of the commercial benefits, and we were also taught how to actually local consumption. I think that should be the main area to focus on. Over the next couple of years, it's going to reduce the population or the way we see the giant African snail as a pest, in the sense that developing a commercial market, as Dr. Ona pointed out, is $1 billion industry, and also an awareness campaign on how to handle the snails would definitely reduce the population of, or the, we say friend or foe, or how we see it as a foe, or the problem we see in giant African snail. Interestingly, my sister who is in Nigeria, I called her and I mentioned to her that this is a pest in Trinidad. And her response was, can you ship a container back home? And immediately she said, I can market it for you. And she said, I have to freeze it. And so if we begin to handle it commercially, it will no longer be a problem. All our efforts towards controlling it, pesticides, eliminating it, has been to no avail. It's just moving around, going around in a circle. So I think the better approach would be looking at the commercial viability and the economic benefit. And we would definitely be seeing it as a friend instead of as a foe. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we should start shipping containers? Let's, yeah, gentleman there. Just introduce yourself.
Yeah, me know?
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I've heard all the...
Let's, just a little introduction of yourself.
Yeah.
We'll appreciate
Oh,
it.
I'm Farid Rahman, agronomist, right? Also director of Prova Distributors Limited in Trinidad. We are also a supplier of metallic snail baits. There are a couple of problems we have. One is that the metallic snail baits in Trinidad is overused. The problem we have is that nobody in this country reads a label. If you read a label, right, you will understand how to use the bait. The bait is overused, right? That's one of the major problems we have in the country. Because we sell the metal halide baits, and the amount of bait that we sell doesn't add up to the snail population that we have, quite honestly. No, I'm being honest. Because we don't read labels. And even the professors and everybody else inside this room, I'm telling you, don't read labels. That's the first thing. Secondly, we have to have an integrated approach to the farming community. The snail bait can be used to control the snail problem at the correct rate. And also the neem products can be used later in the crop to reduce the snail population on the crop. In addition to that, there are some things like chlorine dioxide, which can be used as a sanitizer to sanitize any produce before it leaves this country. So there's an integrated approach that can be used to control this whole issue, right? But at the end of the day, the people in this room, the professors and whoever it is, we have to give the farmers a proper protocol on how to deal with the situation, right? I agree with the guy, there's someone who spoke there. There's a lot of potential commercially, right? But as it stands right now, it's a major pest in the country, and we have to deal with it. It's unfortunate in 2008 when we didn't spend the money to eradicate it. That is history, right? So we have to deal with the situation as it is. But there are protocols that can be used to help the farmers and at the same time to develop the market in a commercial scale, right? And I think going forward, that is how we have to look at the solutions.
Thank you very much, sir. How many of us read labels? But again, the labels are not even, user-friendly. That is the major problem that we have. Some of the labels, just if the manufacturers, the producers can put their labels, put the important thing, highlight the most important thing so that the user will take it and run with it. Okay, but a lot of people here read labels. That's very interesting. But one important message here, of course, it remains a pest in Trinidad and Tobago. It is a pest. Yeah? And of course, we're not sitting here and telling you, go and boil it and eat it. No, that's not what we're saying. all we're saying here, there are avenues for research, there are avenues for, for developing policies as well on this problem that we have. Yeah? Okay. Right. Let's get someone who has not spoken. Yeah, go ahead. Introduce yourself.
Hi, good day. Rishi Mohan Singh, agricultural entomologist. Now, we are in a forum here. We are supposed to come with information and leave with information as well, right? And I'm sure all of us seated here today know how devastating giant African snail is. Some form, some fashion, whether home garden, farmers, whatever. But the thing is, and we see this a lot on social media, a lot of false news has been going all around, and people love the false news, love to spread the false news, right? And if we leave here, at least leave with one thing. We need to get rid of this snail, right? In order for that to happen, we must be speaking from one book and not saying a number of different things. The first thing is, and you can do your research, that is why we have the internet. Anywhere you have giant African snail as a pest, it's invasive, the first line of defense is reducing the population. How do you reduce the population? By using metaldehyde bait. That is the #1 way of controlling giant African snail. Now, people are talking about the amounts and it's toxic. Is anybody looking at their tomato fruit and asking how much pesticides on that tomato fruit? No. Is anybody asking how much pesticide is on their cabbage? No. Sometimes when you cook your cabbage, you can actually smell the amount of pesticides on it, right? According to what Prova just said just now, the label tells you how to use metaldehyde. You're barely supposed to be seeing it on your field when you use it properly. So the thing is, bringing the population down is the #1 way of dealing with it. How are we going to deal with the eggs? Like Mr. Ramdua said, you control the adult population little by little. Let's say you do have some eggs. They will grow up and they will reach a stage where they will eat the bait. If we keep mentioning that and keep promoting that, little by little, it is going to go down. But we keep talking about everything else and putting fear in people's mind. I'm not touching the snail. I'm not applying this. I'm not doing this. This is toxic. That is toxic. So something what the ministry is promoting, like we keep saying, bringing down the population. These are the products to use. Once you and try it, it's things that have been done, it has been tried, and it works. There were areas, I think it was in St. Joseph, where the community got together and they started baiting their area. And from 3-digit numbers where they were collecting snails, they were able to bring it down to 1-digit numbers, right? By just doing an intensive approach. Because you can't use bait, whether iron phosphate or metaldehyde, once. It is like rats. You have to be doing it over a period of time. So in dry season, they recommend usually every 2 to 3 weeks. In the rainy season, once per week. Metaldehyde bait has been formulated differently now, where even if rain falls, it doesn't dissolve immediately. So it is still there in the environment. So just to summarize what I'm saying, we have to be talking about one thing, not a million different things. And the last thing I will say, it is still a notifiable pest. That means you cannot be rearing it. It is illegal to rear it, right? So whatever potentials we are thinking. And finally, we are Trinis. We love all different types of delicacies. I don't know if anybody ever had it here, but we know of oysters that we eat raw. There's also another one where they call it a cocktail. And that cocktail is a mixture of oysters and different other types of organisms. Once we start promoting eating giant African snail, who is monitoring if they're going to cook that snail? Right? It is the raw snail they could, I'm just saying that they could use in that same thing, and then we run the risk. All of us who are seated here, yes, we have whatever is our profession, but according to the Ministry of Health, we are not supposed to be consuming giant African snail. So please let us try the message. Whatever is the message, it must be one message if we really want to get the snail under control. And as of last year, the Ministry of Health did say there's not one recorded case of meningitis in humans to date. No one has come to the health facility and has reported whatever form of symptom, and it is related to meningitis leading to snails, right? Just remember that. We have to be very careful what we are saying, right? If that is the case, if for some reason you do have some symptoms, you do report it to the Ministry of Health. But as it stands, there is no recorded cases of that. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much.
Hi.
Our entomologist from
Good
the
evening.
ministry, we appreciate that. And it is very clear that all of us are singing from the same hymn book, because it is clear that we are here, we are not telling anybody to go and cook the snail and eat. We are just bringing, based on the title that we have, risk, risk, roles, and resources. And it is important for us. And it is also important for us not to box ourselves. We need to think outside the box. It is important. That is important for the development of any human being, the development of any nation. So it is a pest, ladies and gentlemen, and please handle it with care. With care. And I could remember it was mentioned clearly that population has actually decreased. I think one of the presenters mentioned that. Population has actually decreased, and it is because of measures that have been taken and so on. And we can do even better going forward by focusing our attention on research and other things, policy development that will help us address this the very serious pest that we have in our hands. Yeah, so I think we'll bring this to an end at this point. And thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not asking you to go yet. I will invite back our moderators to just take us through the remainder of the agenda. Thank you, Dr. Ryan. Yeah. Thank you, our panel. We appreciate it, and all that would have brought questions, and all the listeners, and so on.
Thank you very much to all the panelists and our moderator. There isn't much remaining on the agenda. In fact, I'm just tasked with closing the session and providing a little overview, and just reminding you that nobody at UWI or UTT said to go and eat snail, right? That's the take home. But I really appreciate the comment from Rishi, who kind of outlined the current status in terms of our policies, regulations, etc., which is very important for us to understand as well. So thank you very much for putting that comment forward. And he's one of the persons that I think through the ministry did a lot of the training for giant African snail, etc. So good. Now, we had quite a few people that we have to thank for their contributions. We had our deputy principal, the president of UTT, my co-chair, thank you very much, all the panelists from the various institutions, both UE, UTT, and also I want to thank all those who would have helped organize this session, right? So some of them are actually outside, so they may not hear me. But we had a very good team who would have put all of this together. Celine, Shauna, also our marketing support who is always with us. Josanne, Miss Josanne Green, thank you very much, right? And all our additional support staff, right? From my general overview of this session, we got a good bit of information understanding the life cycle of the snail, take different types of treatment, understanding different options. But it's also prudent for us to understand that while options are available, we need to do the research and understand what are the impacts of those options before we advise people to do A, B, C, D, etc. As it currently stands, it is a pest. It's notifiable pest and animal, and we have to ensure that we follow our current regulations. And on the side, UWI and UTT can continue to do their research, make that research public, and continue to carry out these engagements as we discover things along the way. Right? So in summary, that's really what I get from this. And many times, I think somebody brought up the issue of trusting farmers. Nobody knows what a farmer does when you buy tomato from a market. You don't even know where that comes from. Plus, when we talk about eating the snail, it becomes a little issue. People say, your face look a little, like not very happy, but we eat manikou. We eat manikou, we eat iguana. So who knows where we will go from here? But the reality is that we must be cautious. We must understand that there's policies and regulations that exist, and we must do the research to get us to the point where we need to be. So with that, I thank all of you for attending. We have some very, very small, slight refreshments for you all outside. It is very, in terms of how it looks, it may resemble some mucin, right? But it is not, right? I assure you what we have prepared is not snail or anything close to it, but there's some slight refreshments as you walk through the door. It's to your right, straight in front of you, right? So please enjoy and thank you all very much. Have a good night and reach home safely.